Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing okay this morning. This one is going to be blisteringly quick. It's not a lot of meat on this bone, but I'm going to rip it off to the degree that I can rip it off. That sounds more epic than it needs to be. Now, let me check one more thing. Good. Just want to make sure everything is working right and the sound is doing what it's supposed to do. Look, guys, I want to thank everyone that helps with the channel itself, whether that's patrons, super chat, whether that's sending videos, links, and the video that I'm about to do now, the story that I'm about to do right now, came from one of my subscribers. Jesus Christ, I wrote down his name. Oh, Daniel Neal Robinson. Yeah, Daniel Neal Robinson. David Neal Robinson. I'm sorry. I kept looking at that like that's not right. David Neal Robinson. Thank you very much, David. I appreciate this. This was an awesome story. So, take a look at this. Let's hop across the pond. Now, my American audience is not fully going to understand all the intricacies of what's taking place. I probably don't understand all the intricacies of what's taking place. I don't think anybody does. In any particular way, something is always going to be left out of a process that somebody's analyzing. Just looking at it, meaning you're outside of it, just by the very act that you're looking at it or observing. Let's observe something that took place in Britain. You don't necessarily have to fully be aware. I'll explain what's taking place and the problem with what is taking place.
Let's have a listen. Order! Order!
Great stuff. Never mind the jobs.
The eyes to the right, 301. The nose to the left, 307.
The government scraped home by 6. 301. The nose to the left, 307. So the nose have it. The nose have it. Unlocked. Well, the government has scraped home. So the cheers were from the government side. It's 307 to the government, 301 to the Remainers. 31 to 35. I hope I've heard that correctly. It's 307 for the government, 301. So the government has won by 6 votes. Well, I must admit, when I heard a cheer, I thought perhaps that was from the Labour benches. Obviously not, but from the government benches. So despite losing on one new clause, the government has won on the crucial vote. They have the Remainers are 6 votes short. 307 to 301 suggests that not as many Conservative MPs as was necessary to defeat the government, obviously, have voted against the government. It looks as though some of those blood-curdling threats from government whips have paid off. And
Did you hear that? Blood-curdling threats from whips. That's amazing, right? Blood-curdling. They describe it as blood-curdling. Now, what they mean by that are whips. Whips are the people who go in and try to get the party to fall in line. So think Chuck Schumer wants the Democratic Party to vote a particular way. Chuck Schumer, I forget who does the whips for the Democrats, but goes out there and, I think it's Durbin, I'm not sure, but goes out there and gets those people to fall in line and vote their particular way. Same thing with Pelosi and the Democratic side on the House. Well, in Parliament, same thing. The government has a razor-thin majority. That razor-thin majority is divided. If you remember, Theresa May had a snap election with this idea that she was going to break labor. She was going to take Jeremy Corbyn, hold her over there, land him on her knee and break Jeremy Corbyn in half. But that's not what took place. The opposite. So instead of her having this kind of straight majority, she had to form with a fringe group for the DUP in order to create a majority government. Fair enough, or mixed government. Now, the problem with that is her party is already divided, so it is not a foregone conclusion that Theresa May are going to win the votes, these amendments that are going to go towards the white paper. Now, the white paper is a document that's going to be given to the European Union so they can have a negotiating piece. The sick joke to this theater is that this document is dead on arrival. Now, that being said, scale back to that for the moment. What you just saw was essentially a vote read. Now, the problem here, and like I said, you were seeing something that was problematic. Something wasn't right with that. The interesting thing about our reality is nothing, even when something is going wrong, There's there's no red arrow. There's no, finger of God pointing it out saying, hey, this particular thing is going wrong. This particular thing is corrupt, or this particular Tory is cheating in this moment. Because there was Tories cheating in that moment. That enterprise that you saw, that tight vote, where you had those savage whips wielding blood-curdling threats, involved cheating. It involved cheating. First, let me give you the blood-curdling threats that they were wielding. If you don't vote with the government will collapse, and we will have a no-confidence vote, which may trigger a general election. The threat that they're wielding is Jeremy Corbyn. They've weaponized Corbyn in order to motivate some of the people to vote on their behalf. Some of which, if I'm not mistaken, were labor turncoats. The problem with that vote, and if you notice, that vote was razor thin. It was a vote to remain in the customs union, or to create a customs union if there's a no-deal Brexit. It was by the Remainers. The Remainers was trying to have their last stand. Now, the problem with that is Britain, Parliament, the UK, has this thing called pairings. Now, I like this idea. If somebody is indisposed, or let's say somebody is pregnant, let's say that person's name was Joe Swinson. Let's say Joe Swinson is preggo, and she's out giving birth to some creature, bringing it into this cruel, dark world. Now, one of the bright spots of this cruel, dark world is that the UK is progressive enough to say, if you're out having birth, you're not out, prostituting or something. You're out giving birth. You're out doing something positive. And it's not that prostitution is negative. I'm just saying. Between the two, I think, you know what I mean. You get my point. We will, in the other party, will pair up with you to withdraw our vote. So you're not going to be penalized because you're having a baby. Members of another party would also sit out. And so you come up with these pairing arrangements and these pairing agreements. Now, while Joe Swanson was out attending to her needs for a kid, either birthing that baby or taking care of that baby or having something to do with a kid, this vote was going on. Joe Swinson had pairing agreements with a gentleman named Brandon Lewis, conservative Brandon Lewis. Now, the savage, blood-curdling whips, or you can say the savage whips, they were trying to get the government to win. Chief Whip Julian Smith, it was reported in the Times, told Brandon Lewis and 3 other Tories to ignore the pairing. This is crunch time. Ignore that pairing. I understand that Joe Winston is having a baby. I understand. Get it. I'm happy for her. A mother's love is a beautiful thing. But this is politics and we need to win. Now, initially, what they kept saying was, it was an accident. We did not mean to do it. It was a good-natured accident, and I'm really sorry, Joe Winston. I'm sorry. Yes, that vote is going to stand, but I'm apologetic. After I made the votes, breaking the pledge. This is dramatically problematic. Nor can this be allowed to pass. Either you have a pairing system or you don't have a pairing system. And that pairing system can't just fall away the moment that you get a tight vote and the government is a zombie or this kind of disintegrating government. This is problematic. Chief Whip Julian Smith telling people to ignore the pairing agreements that they had, the pairing agreements that were part of parliamentary, you can say, understanding of business. He should resign or he should be sacked. It should be one or the other. But that is a dramatic, assume for the moment that, look, I guess I look at this stuff as the moment that somebody breaks one of the rules, it breaks the rule altogether. It becomes this kind of unequal system in the way that these things are operating that can't be tolerated. If I assume that people, I don't think morality is something that's external to the person. And yes, this is going to be a slight bit of wood to chop, but I want to make it fast. I don't necessarily think morality is inherent to the individual. I think they're mirror neurons and those type of things that reflect those things. But I think we learn those things and we pass those things along in these kind of cultural traditions. So culturally, so much tradition that we think those things are somewhat inherent. I don't think they are. We learn at some point in the distant past that, hey, if I don't hit you over the head, maybe you won't hit me over the head. And at the very least, we can putter about not hitting each other over the head and doing other things with our time. And at some point, that becomes a society where you have a social contract of things that you somewhat agree to not do to each other that would allow you a bit of autonomy in your life. When you get into issues of politics, it's not any different. Like, think of it a situation of nuclear weapons. The moment one country gets a nuclear weapon, other countries has to give nuclear weapons because they want to minimize the differential advantage of one of the other countries. So you end up with a situation where multiple countries have nuclear weapons. None of them will get rid of those nuclear weapons because they want to maintain that particular differential advantage. If someone puts weapons in space, same thing. Trump puts weapons in space. China has put weapons in space. Russia has put weapons in space because they need to maintain or balance out the differential advantage. I'm making the point that the same thing kind of applies here in Parliament. The moment that that rule is broken, if you're going to have that rule where you say we are progressive enough that if a person is pregnant, we are going to sit out, we're going to be fair about it, then the rule needs to apply. Even in situations of crunch time, even in situations where the government may collapse. Jo Swinson was not happy about this. She was pretty pissed off. So, right here. After Mr. Lewis was shown that participated in the votes, Mrs. Swinson accused the government of desperate stuff. She wrote on Twitter, "This is calculated, deliberate breaking of trust by government whips to win at all costs." Brandon abstained in the afternoon divisions, but voted in the 2 crunch votes after 6 p.m. That's a word for it. Cheating. And she's absolutely right. Meaning, you had presence of mind enough to not vote in the earlier ones, but you voted in the later ones. Let's keep going. Mrs. Swinson also called on MPs to end the charade and decide on proxy voting procedures next week. Responding to the roll, Mr. Lewis told Swinson, "I'm sorry, Joe. I think it was an honest mistake made by the whip in fast-moving circumstances." Do you now? I bet you would say that, seeing as you're the one, you guys were the ones that did it. But right here, this is the Times. Chief Whip Julian Smith faces calls to quit over pairing deals claim. Julian Smith, the chief whip, is facing calls to resign after criticism from fellow conservatives after the Times revealed claims that he urged the Tory MPs to abandon pairing arrangements before a knife-edge vote on Tuesday. Pairing is a parliamentary convention by which pairs of MPs on different sides of the Commons agree not to vote so that an absence of such a maternity leave does not count against a member. Mrs. Smith summoned Brandon Lewis, the Tory chairman, from a meeting to the Parliament as a crunch vote on the customs approach. Witnesses claim the chief whip is understood to have told Mr. Lewis that the later votes were going to be close and he needed him to vote. This breached the pairing deal with Jo Swinson. Resign your seat or be sacked. That woman was giving birth or attending to her child. And you is, wow. I mean, I find this to be amazing. Yes, the deal was close, but this is one of those things where a parliamentary procedure of sorts or parliamentary agreements. And he was willing to break and trash that agreement, outright cheating in order to win. What happened if it was one vote and it was his one vote that did it? They weren't going to redo that vote. I mean, ultimately, there would have been a situation where they would have gotten past based on that one particular vote for something that was never supposed to have taken place. It doesn't matter that this didn't prosper. Meaning, it didn't matter that there was more than 5 votes. It is easily conceivable to see a situation where this is a 1 or 2 vote scenario, and this is the deciding vote, and the mechanism to correct it will probably not be in place. Meaning, whatever that vote is probably going to stand. This is a big deal. Either you are progressive enough to care about the fact somebody is giving birth, that you don't want to disadvantage that person in the parliamentary process, or you don't. But like you said, let's end the charade. He needs to be sacked or he needs to resign. He outright cheated and then lied about the cheating with a bunch of people backing him up in that lie. He needs to be sacked. I'm going to end it here. I'm not going to keep this one long because there's not much on it. But David, thank you very much for this one. I like this story. The story is damn interesting. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Joe Swinson is right. This is extremely desperate stuff on behalf of the government. Tories cheated. Outright, completely, unequivocally cheated. And then lied about it. That's what makes it special. Thanks, guys.